about it. I want to bring in Kevin McCarthy. You know him. He was a representative out of California for many years, Speaker of the House. It's good to have you, Kev. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
So the president reinstituted the travel ban. My concern the first time was that he was targeting Muslims, and he said it. Islam hates us. I felt that was, obviously condemning an entire faith and very un-American. Fought its way through the courts, took out the word Muslim, started talking about countries and their processes, is now doing it again. Is he again making the same mistake of right problem, right? We got to be careful about places that are sending in people who want to hurt us, but too many places punishing too many people who are part of what makes us great, not what we have to be against.
Look, one of the greatest things of America is the idea that you could come to America, you could become a citizen legally. I think what President Trump is doing here is pretty smart, because he's changing the process. We've found that the screening process has become a tremendous problem on who's just coming in. And that's really what he's doing. He's not judging somebody based upon faith. He's really looking at countries and telling them you have to have your screening process improved. And you watch what we're doing today, what we found, right? These Chinese students and others. We actually should congratulate the FBI and law enforcement. They are doing things that are right, grabbing people before the problem arises. But improving the screening process, I think, is a place that we all can agree upon.
Now, what does that when you just have a restriction? Is there, do you believe that there's a second phase to this where he says change your processes and I'll remove the restriction?
Yes. I think the restriction is a pause, because what's the reward? People want to come to America, but you can't just send anybody in. We have this challenge in a lot of different countries, and it kind of wakes everybody up. You talk about what Secretary of State Marco Rubio is doing with all the students who've been coming to America. We have found time and again. I mean, I'm very concerned about these two Chinese students, because if you want to destroy a country, the first thing you do is you go after their food supply and their water supply. If you watch and you look at history, we have caught Chinese spies in Iowa because they want to steal the technology of how to produce the food that we produce in America. Xi Jinping, when he was young and he came to America, where did he go? New York, California? He went and spent time and stayed in homes in Iowa. They have a large population. They want to be able to eat. You watch Chinese companies buying the products or buying the companies that provide our meat supply. You've watched a couple years ago when the South, the fuel supply got cut off. You watched how America reacted. These are all indicators where countries look at, could America sustain themselves, or could you cause problems from within? Those are things we want to make sure countries cannot do. And really what these two students were studying and what they were bringing into the country, what if it was let go? Even in a mistake period, that could decimate America's...
no question.
Even by a mistake part of doing it.
So I get it, but are we doing their work for them? This guy, Chris Piotta, who worked in terrorism, worked for the FBI for a lot of years, he said something that made me think that I wonder if I should be pointing the finger at you and at me, that this is what you get. This fundamentalism that's picking up here at home, people who are yelling at each other and talking trash and things getting hotter and hotter and lower, and we all know what Trump is capable of, and we know what that has fed and what has been brought his way. Did we do this to ourselves? Is this why we have all this fundamentalism and these people acting out in violence off perverse ideas? Because this is what you get when all you do is yell at each other and create fights and say that everything sucks.
No, because let's look at the history. Let's look at Timothy McVeigh, one of the most dangerous things that happened in America, the Oklahoma bombing from within, what time period that have. I do look at America as a whole, right? What has happened to television, right? You don't provide news, you provide opinion. We watch the loss of respecting one another's opinions. We can disagree with one another, but now we dislike if you don't have the same political opinion with one another. That hurts America themselves, right? Then the internet compounds it, because you're always going to have some fringe people, but it allows them to collectively find one another and plan. This is a place that America needs to look deep, and you really look at, is it a breakup in the family? Is it a breakup of the community? Is it it less time together? Is it political parties not solving problems? Is it people being left behind? Is it an education system not helping people get out? I think there's something all around. But look, I wouldn't want to be any place else in the world than America today, and I'd never count against us. But I think what we really need to do is sit down at the table, look at our problems, and have elected officials come to the conclusion, let's find solutions instead of things that differentiate. But it's also a responsibility to every single American. It's not just the elected officials to have to solve this problem, because we're a microcosm of society. We reflect exactly what the country looks like.
Yeah, until the guys get in there and they're there so long that they start to change and forget. What is the one thing that you've learned since you've been out that you wish that if you could go back and change something, you would do differently?
Well, I look like this. It's a continuing education. I wish members had a little more time, instead of having to run constantly, to pause a day and spend without the cameras around and think about how to solve. And what I try to do even as speaker is to pick those macro problems, the problems that both parties agree you cannot solve them by one party, right? I'd say our debt, I'd say China, and there's something I did with China, okay? I created the Select Committee on China, which is the most bipartisan committee we've had in Congress during the most probably partisan times, that actually worked together and continues to work together. So it can work, but you put the cause together. So when I created this committee, I sat down with the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and I literally showed him who I was going to appoint before I showed my own conference. And I said, when we constitute this committee, I want you to constitute it with me. And when we sat there, and we did the same thing with the Intel committee, because we had to fix it. And I said, listen, I'm not going to do anything in this committee to try to defeat you in your election. You could come to Hakeem or you could come to me. The only thing we're going to look at is what's best for America. Take the politics out of it. And to the credit to the members who've served, they continue to do that. And I think that's very important. And we need to grow. There's not a problem with having differences of opinion. There's not a problem with arguing the different points. You want the best idea to win at the end of the day. But to solve the debt, you can't have one party look at it and who's ever in the minority is going to criticize it. We had this same problem when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s. No member was going to raise their hand and said, close the military base in my district for the good of the country. And we created something called BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closure. We should do that for the Debt Committee, because what we do at the end of the day, when that committee comes to a conclusion and has a vote and it gets there, and the equal number of who appoints to it, all it's guaranteed is a vote in the House and the Senate with no amendments.
Good.
And you know what would happen at the end of the day? There'd be a bipartisan vote for it.
I like it.
And I think structure dictates behavior. So if we change the structure in some of these problems, the behavior would be different.
I like it. Kevin McCarthy, appreciate the perspective. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.